For our college football best bets presented by FanDuel. And let's see. Wow, Chip Patterson just keeps plugging away.
He's on a heater.
Another great week. 12-6 overall. He's now 76-59. Danny is, well, he's almost mathematically eliminated, though he was close to 500 last week.
Hey, wait a second. Chip, do you want to tell him about the finish on the Cover 3 pod the 1 year? How many in a row was it you lost?
Well, in total, it was 2 and 25. It was getting correct just 2 of my final 27 plays of the season.
So he's not a good closer.
So there's hope. There is hope.
Well, we've got a bunch of ranked-on-ranked matchups this week. 5, a season-high 5 ranked-on-ranked games, even though 4 of the top 10 teams are on a bye this week. Let's get to it. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by Danny Kanell in studio. Chip Patterson is with us as well, nursing a large lead. Chip, since you have the lead, I'm going to let you give us our first pick here. We're starting with these ranked-on-ranked matchups, and it includes Notre Dame and Navy. This is MetLife Stadium. The only other time they played here was back in 2010, and Navy won that game.
I would not be surprised, a little surprised, but I would not be surprised if Navy wins the game. But when you're going to hang this kind of spread in a game that could end up being a little bit lower scoring, a little bit fewer possessions than you would expect, give me Navy, give me Blake Horvath, and give me a midshipman offense that, surprising to many if you haven't been paying attention, might actually be able to take advantage of some of the injuries that Notre Dame has had in the secondary so far this year. You know, you might want to attack this total, but even with the way that Navy has almost covered a total by themselves with some of the offensive explosions, I just think that this midshipman team has enough to be able to go into this game. And I think the red zone execution is where it's going to become really important. Navy's done a great job of keeping teams out of the end zone, and that's what they're going to need to do against Riley Leonard and his legs. So give me Navy to cover this big spread. Now, they've been too good for me to think that Notre Dame's going to be able to keep them at arm's length for 60 minutes.
Did you say you would be surprised if Navy won this game? Did I hear that correctly? Okay.
That is correct.
I would be shocked if Navy wins this game.
Danny, they beat Memphis, and we know what Memphis did to your nose.
Why you got to bring that up? This is not a Florida State segment because we're only talking about top 25 teams. Thank you, Chip, for saying that for me. He just tossed it up and you hit it out of the park. Navy's been an incredible story, but all good things, sadly, have to come to an end. And it's been great. Blake Horvath has really opened up this offense. 3 passing touchdowns last week, his best throwing performance so far in a run-based offense that traditionally they keep it on the ground. But you know who else is running the ball? Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard for Notre Dame. And that's the difference. I think Notre Dame is able to establish the run and establish both lines of scrimmage so they can control it and win this game pretty comfortably. Marcus Freeman called out Howard Cross III a couple weeks ago with some of those injuries, and he asked some of those defensive linemen to step up in the absence of some of the losses of cost there, and they really have responded. Notre Dame knows what is at stake here. This is a resume builder, which is something we never would have thought coming into the season. They know their playoff hopes are still alive. They've got that Northern Illinois loss just hanging around that's just a black cloud over them. They want to put that in the rear view as far as they can, and they can do that with impressive performance. I think they get it, so I think they win and cover.
This was the matchup we saw to start the season last year in Ireland that Notre Dame won 42-3. Let's go to the CBS game, 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. I'm getting real sick of Tom Fornelli, by the way. The Illinois Fighting Illini, again, on CBS, they are getting a lot of points, 21.5 at Oregon. I don't think Fornelli is going to be gloating after this one.
Well, he did call it by $1 billion once again, so he feels pretty good, although that might be a slightly biased pick. I don't know if he would put a lot of money on it, but I think this game is really interesting. You know, we were doing our big game preview on our Cover 3 podcast and big game breakdown, and I was looking at ways to try to figure out how could Illinois either potentially win this game, or in this case, how could they keep it inside the big number here. And I said, you know what, why look at that, but why look at a game that I think could unfold similar to what we saw with Illinois versus Purdue. I think Illinois' offense is really good. Luke Ottmeyer is executing it to a high level. Barry Lunny puts him in really good positions, gets the ball out of his hands. He's crafty. He finds out ways not to take a lot of sacks. And they've got 2 really good wide receivers in Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. So I think they're able to put up points on Oregon's defense. But the bad news is I think Oregon's offense is able to score against Illinois' defense as well. And I think they're able to run the football right at the heart of that Illinois defense, where it's been a little bit suspect recently. So I think what will be a higher scoring game, it's too many points for me to tackle and say Oregon will cover. Or that's probably where I would lean. But I think Illinois gets some points on the scoreboard. So I'm going to tackle the over here, Chip.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a little bit of matchup, a little bit of trends, and a little bit of vibes right here. Shocker, I know. So let's first start with the trends. Oregon has been a very good first half team. They show up, they're ready to play, they handle their business, especially against competition that they are heavily favored against. 21-0 at halftime against Purdue, 21-0 at halftime against Michigan State, and 28-10 at halftime against UCLA. Now we do have to ratchet it way up when we're talking about a team like Illinois, but I still think that that has to be taken into consideration, at least in terms of the way that Oregon's offense is not a slow starting group. They tend to be very efficient and have been since they got into conference play. The other piece of this is if there's going to be any Illinois hangover, I do think it'll be right off the jump. The fact that Oregon got its business done on Friday, Illinois got to celebrate in the leather helmets on Saturday night. They're the ones going across country to Eugene. So a little bit of a slow start for the Fighting Illini would not surprise me, and I'd be terrified of that back door, which is why at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, I was thrilled to see a choice number on the first half spread. So that's where we're going. Oregon minus 13.5. They lead at halftime by 2 touchdowns. We cash our winners and don't even have to sweat the back door.
All right, Illinois, 1 loss this season. It came at Penn State, the only other time they played an elite team, and it was 21-7. Let's go to the SEC. Missouri, 1 loss, ranked number 21. Alabama, 2 losses, ranked number 15. And Bama is a 2-touchdown favorite at home. Jalen Milroe is really banged up, though, Danny. What's your play here?
He is. This one scares me. It's probably my least favorite play of the week. I don't trust Missouri, even though we had Brady Cook leave the game, go to the hospital, get an MRI, come back and lead a 17-play, 95-yard drive to win the game against Auburn. This is a different story, though. Alabama has to have their backs up against the wall. Their defense has been so bad, and they actually do a decent job. Did a better job last week, although there were a lot of points left on the board from Tennessee. But this one is about Jalen Milroe and that offense. I think they get back to running the football against Mizzou. It's in Tuscaloosa. I've got to imagine there's a sense of urgency around that building saying we can still salvage our season, and there is no way we're losing to Missouri. My trend with Missouri all year long has been they blow out the bad teams and they struggle against the good teams. As bad as Bama has been compared to their recent success, I still think they're better than Mizzou. By 2 touchdowns, I'm going to go ahead and back the Tide here, although I'm a little bit nervous about it, Chip.
Yeah, you're nervous because this is a drunken bar fight. And just like any innocent bystander watching 2 imperfect, drunken people fight at a bar, you're like, I don't know if I want to be here. I don't want to be an accessory to this game. But hold my feet to the fire, Chris. Here's what I got for you. So what we've seen from Jalen Milroe is, I agree with you, a definite slowdown in his production. He does not look anywhere near as explosive as he looked at the beginning of the season. The deep ball, his real ace in the hole has not been there. This whole Alabama offense is just kind of stuck in the mud right now, while at the same time, Missouri's offense has never been anywhere close to what we expected, given the pieces, the way they appeared on paper. Brady Cook nursing that injury. I'm sure he's bringing all the hero vibes to practice about how we can go into Tuscaloosa and put ourselves right back in the thick of this thing. I don't trust either offense at all, and I know this is risky when we're dealing with Alabama's defense, but I still see a game that, like the Tennessee game, is going to be a little bit lower scoring. So I'm going to go under the 55.5 with this one.
Guilty by association. Chip to the drunk tank after this one. Let's move to the Texas-Vanderbilt game. Yes, Vanderbilt is ranked as well. Now, Alabama, the first top 5 team to ever lose to Vanderbilt earlier on this season. That line was 22.5. This line against Texas is 18.5, Danny.
They say lightning never strikes twice. There's no way Vanderbilt could pull this off again, right? They already did that against Alabama. I don't know if it needs to strike twice. I don't know if they win the game, but 18.5 is a lot of points for a Vanderbilt team that is clearly one of the better stories across college football this season. I am a member of the Pavia Mafia here. Diego Pavia has been a great story executing that system. And the other thing about it is the Jerry Kill influence on this offense is it's very savvy. It knows how to exploit defense's weaknesses, and it also knows how to protect them from really getting exposed at some of the mismatches they could see along the front lines of scrimmage. So I'm going to say Vanderbilt keeps this one close. For me, this feels like a game that Texas just wants to get out of, right? They just had the tough loss against Georgia. They're coming in. Everybody's reminded them of what happened to Alabama when they played Vanderbilt. That's why I don't think they lose, but they better be ready for a physical fight, because that's the one thing I noticed about Pavia. When he runs the football, he's looking to deliver punishment to whatever defender comes up to tackle him, and the mentality creeps throughout that whole Vanderbilt team. Texas better be ready for a fist fight, because it's going to get into one, which is a phrase I never thought I would say about a Vanderbilt team.
All right, we also have, and Chip, by the way, took Vanderbilt in that game as well, so you guys are on the same side. We have a game featuring the only two remaining unbeaten teams in SEC play, and it's number 8 LSU going on the road College Station at number 14 A&M, and A&M is laying 2.5 at home.
This might be my favorite play of the week. I like the Aggies at home. The 12th man, it's one of the most ferocious places to play. The crowd is absolutely bonkers, but I also am a believer in both sides of the football. We knew about this Aggie defense, which has been really good all season long, including in their lone loss to A&M. And Nick Scorton, the Purdue transfer, who's been continuing his incredible defensive play, terrorizing opposing quarterbacks. And I think that continues, getting after Garrett Nussmeier, where he's not going to be able to hear anything. We saw him get knocked around in South Carolina. They were able to win that game with a couple controversial calls at the end of the game. But the offense is where I trust no matter who's playing quarterback. With Marcel Reed, when he took over, it provided an explosive element, and I thought they should have stuck with him. Then we saw Connor Wegman come in, and they dominated from Missouri from start to finish. I'm mildly concerned about Connor Wegman throwing a couple picks against Mississippi State, but that was a look-ahead game if there ever was one. I think this team knows what's at stake here. It's a great little rivalry that carries over from the SEC West. I think A&M wins this game comfortably.
Look, the winner of this game is going to be the only remaining perfect team in SEC play. Which team? I know you're giving this to A&M because it's in College Station, but which team would you say has more of a chance to do damage if they get to the college football playoff?
It's tough because I give the edge to Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback, but I still have concerns about LSU's defense, which has been better than it was last year, but I still don't think it's an elite category. And one thing I've kind of seen from college football this year, quarterbacks are struggling somewhat. Look, we talk about Jalen Milroe, especially in the SEC. Jalen Milroe, Nico, even last week, look at what happened to the Georgia-Texas game where all three quarterbacks who played, yes, Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, and Carson Beck, all subpar. Why was that? Because the resurgence of incredible defense, which win games, that Texas A&M defense, I think, is the front that I give the edge to. So I think they could do the most damage if they do get to the college football playoff. And I actually think they are a team that does get to the college football playoff, in large part because their schedule, it sets up very friendly for them. Of course, you circle that game against Texas, which a couple weeks ago you might have said, man, I don't know if A&M can hang with Texas. If Texas A&M plays defensively the way Georgia does, they could beat Texas in that final game of the year.
Well, Chip is on the opposite side of this one from Danny. He is going with LSU plus the 2.5 in College Station. That's one of our 5 ranked-on-ranked matchups, including our CBS Big Ten Game of the Week. Oregon hosting Illinois. Danny's going with the over in that one. Chip likes Oregon first half minus 13.5. They only agree on Vandy plus 18.5 at home against the Longhorns. Well, we got a couple of really nice weekday games in the college football schedule this week. On Thursday, unbeaten Pittsburgh hosting 5-1 Syracuse. Then on Friday, maybe the group of 5 game of the year, Boise State at UNLV. Both those teams with just the 1 loss. We'll also pick some Saturday early games as well. Chris Hassel joined by Danny Kanell in studio. We've got Chip Patterson rejoining us from the cave. Hello, Chip. I'll let you lead us off. The Panthers of Pittsburgh, just one of 7 unbeaten power conference teams, but nobody's talking about them.
I think that they might be after this game. I mean, Eli Holstein is not a household name, and yet I think that he could be after this game. This Pitt offense has done a great job under Caden Bell from being able to open things up, being able to push the ball down the field, and here's the Syracuse defense that will give up explosive plays. But again, when I do a deep dive on the Panthers defense, I find a pass defense that can be susceptible, and that's exactly where Kyle McCord, who, by the way, Pat Narduzzi said this week is going to be one of the best quarterbacks they'll play all year. I think Kyle McCord's going to have some success as well. You've got a lot of rivalry history going right now, as Syracuse has not won at Pitt since 2001. Shout out to Paul Pasqualoni. But I think that in this game, the best bet is going to be to tackle the total, because I think both of these offenses are going to be able to move it up and down the field and score against both of these defenses.
Chip, you're right. Eli Holstein is not a household name yet. You know who is? Dan Marino. And that was the last time this program was 6-0. It's been since 1982. And what's crazy about it is it's sort of a bizarro Pitt team that we're talking about, because they are incredibly good on offense, and they're subpar on defense, which goes against everything we've known about the Pat Narduzzi tenure while he's been the head coach at Pitt. But it's working, and don't try to fight it. And I echo everything you said about Kyle McCord and the addition that he's been in that offense. Throwing to guys like Oronde Gadsden Jr. has been awesome. He's a massive weapon to work with, and they've been putting up points. So we are on the exact same page on this one. I think it's going to be a shootout. I think Pitt wins at Acrisure Stadium. It feels like something special is brewing, but Syracuse is not going to go down without a fight, and I don't think they're going to go out without putting up some points. So I'll take the over as well.
Okay, both on the over. Let the children sing. How about Friday? Boise, number 17 in the land, 3.5-point favorites in Vegas against UNLV. This is on CBS Sports Network, Danny. Late night Friday at 10:30 Eastern.
You know what day trader Danny did this week?
What's that?
I sold my Ashton Genty stock, because
really?
I think this is his biggest challenge yet, going against the #1 rushing defense in the Mountain West. Barry Odom has done a phenomenal job. Remember, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about this UNLV team potentially being that group of 5 team that could crash the playoffs, and then they lost to Syracuse. Tough game, but I think this is one where they're still circling it. Massive game within the Mountain West, and I think they get it done this weekend. Remember, they switched quarterbacks. The offense all of a sudden has woken up as well since Matthew Scuba left the program. This team is hungry for this game. It's Friday night. It's Vegas. This is where funky things happen. What stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, except for a loss to Ashton Genty, which will cost them the Heisman Trophy. I think UNLV beats Boise State this weekend and keeps Ashton Genty in check, which is probably around 150 yards, which is incredible, but it's the type of season he's been having.
Yeah, we talk about Ashton Genty a lot, and it's deserved because we just haven't seen, this kind of single season production. We haven't seen this kind of excellence. But who's Boise State's best defensive player? I'll wait. How confident are you in the other aspects of this Boise State team? I'll wait. Danny mentions right there about what this UNLV team could do defensively. Barry Odom, one heck of a defensive coach. You know that he's going to come up with all kinds of plans to try to trick Boise State into making the wrong run-pass decision. And so as I'm gaming this thing out, I don't want to dance with that spread because I do think it's a little bit too tight for what'll be a back-and-forth game. So let's get real specific, because I don't trust Boise State's defense to slow down Haj Malik Williams, Ricky White, and this UNLV offense that has been putting it up on almost everybody since they made that quarterback change. So my best bet is just to look at the UNLV side of this, because there's so many ways to win. Does Ashton Genty run for 250 yards and a bunch of touchdowns? Sure, that's more chances for UNLV to score. Does UNLV go and win this thing running away? Sure, if they do so, they probably put up more than 31.5. I just like the options I've got with this late night Friday night game with the matchup I'm most confident in, UNLV's offense against Boise's defense.
And again, that is on CBS Sports Network at 10:30 Eastern Time, late night out in Vegas, and what will be a Freaky Friday. Did you call it a Freaky Friday?
Sure, we can
I think
go with
you said
that.
Funky Friday.
Yeah.
Freaky Friday is copyrighted. It's already a movie. Saturday, early, noon Eastern Time. It's Ohio State, Chip. They've been sitting around waiting for a couple of weeks after that Oregon loss. They got Nebraska limping in after getting smacked by almost 50 at Indiana.
Yeah, we're going to thread the needle here. I mean, this is like, this is sewing like your grandma can't even do right now. All right, so we're going to start with something that we've seen a lot. Slow starts for Ohio State. And this Nebraska team should come in angry. I mean, they got disrespected by Indiana. They got put into the locker against Indiana. They were facing a backup quarterback, and they couldn't do a daggum thing against Indiana. So I expect them to come out. I expect them to have a crisp first 15 to 20 for Dylan Raiola going up against a terrific defense. Obviously, the fact that Nebraska can't run the ball isn't great, but we saw that Ohio State secondary be just a couple steps slow. Maybe we don't have as many drops from Nebraska's receiver. So we're going to start off the first part of this with Nebraska in the first half plus 14.5. The way I imagine this is we really just need one touchdown. And if we get one touchdown, then we should be sitting pretty the rest of the way, given the way that Ohio State has started slow. And then we jump on the Buckeyes because, as we have said here before, and we will say again, they are one of the best third quarter teams in the entire country. They go into the locker room, they make their adjustments, and they come out looking crisp and dominant after halftime. So we'll go Ohio State plus 14.5 in the first half. Again, great number there, and then jump on that Ohio State minus 6.5 in the third quarter for when I ultimately expect the Buckeyes to lay the hammer.
Man, that's sewing that your grandma wouldn't even wouldn't even attempt that.
Right, she couldn't thread that. Chip, who does excuse me, I just gave it away. Who does Ohio State play next week? I just gave it away because it is Penn State, and that's one of the bigger reasons I'm taking Nebraska here in the 25.5 points. This is a massive number between two conference opponents, and I'll tell you why I lean towards Nebraska. Not only do I think Ohio State, if they do get a 3-touchdown lead, I think they do try to rest some of their guys, even though they're coming off the bye week, to get as fresh as they can for the game against Penn State. I also think they might try to hold some things close to the vest if they don't have to use them for the game against Penn State. And for Nebraska, this is a game to me where it's about optics, because everyone's looking at Matt Rule's tenure and they're saying, all right, where is this Nebraska team? And after an embarrassing loss last week to Indiana, boy, did it feel like a setback. So I think they try to slow this game down a little bit. I think they might even try to slow the pace down by some of the play calling, realizing, you know what? Dylan Raiola has been great. He's going to be great, but we're going to take some of the load off of his shoulders. He's coming off his worst performance, 3 interceptions against Indiana. It was ugly. He's had 4 interceptions, 0 touchdowns the last 2 games. I think they might try to take some of that workload off him, try to run the football, which is not going to be easy, but most importantly, slow the pace down and just try to keep it respectable, which I think is 3 touchdowns. I think that's more than respectable. They just can't get blown out. So I'm going to take Nebraska in that massive point spread.
You can't talk about Nebraska without mentioning that the loss to Indiana. Let's talk Indiana now, because this is an interesting game. They're at home against Washington, but Curtis Rourke, their quarterback, hurt his thumb, reportedly underwent surgery midweek. They're hoping he's only going to miss 1 game, but he is out for this game, Danny.
And it's a huge loss. I mean, he is playing as good as anybody in the Big Ten and as anybody as good in the entire country as far as quarterback goes. And we did see his backup, Taven Jackson, come in and play pretty well. 7 of 8, 2 touchdown passes, but that was in garbage time. I am concerned not about him, how he's going to play. I don't think they need him to play the role of superhero, but they might. And if they're in a dogfight, which I do think this will be a physical game, then I am starting to think, okay, 1 possession game, who do I trust more? I'm going to take Washington here in those 6.5 points, which is good luck, because I think Indiana's been close to perfect against the spread, if not perfect, on the season. But you know what I trust Will Rogers to do? Not to throw 3 interceptions. We just talked about that with Dylan Raiola, who did struggle against them. He's a rookie starter, a first-year starter. Will Rogers is one of the most prolific passers in college football history. And even if the game isn't going well, if he's getting pressured, he's not going to force the turnovers the way a younger quarterback would. So I think he understands, hey, if we can keep this game close into the 4th quarter, we've got a chance, and I think it will be a 4th quarter game. So I'll take Washington in those points.
I found some value in the perception versus the reality, because the perception is that Taven Jackson led 4 touchdown drives. They outscored them 28-0 after halftime. The reality, how did those possessions come about? Interception, interception, turnover on downs, fumble, interception. The average starting field position for Taven Jackson in the second half was on the Nebraska 43, past midfield. I think that offensively, you have to downgrade Indiana at least just a little bit. You just have to. And so in doing that and starting to go back into this Washington game, I also want to look at Indiana's defense and respect the way that they have played so much better than what I was thinking they were going to be coming into the season based on the personnel. They clearly have an edge to them. They have a great knack for being able to get those havoc plays, those tackles for loss, those sacks, and big third down opportunities. I think they'll be able to do that again against Washington. Also, because with the under comes the idea that Washington might not be able to capitalize on red zone opportunities. That's been an issue for the Huskies all season. So in the perception reality, I think we've got value on the total. I think we've got value on the under.
All right, let's move on to Ole Miss hosting Oklahoma. It seemed like a marquee game heading into the season, but Oklahoma is a bad football team right now, and Ole Miss has been struggling lately too, Chip. What do you think of this 20.5-point spread?
It's a big number to cover, but Ole Miss needs to get right. I mean, we just saw that offense sputter just a little bit. The offensive line is starting to get whipped up on, and Oklahoma's got the defense that certainly would make you expect to do it. I think coming out of the off week is going to be great for Ole Miss. I think playing at home is going to be great for Ole Miss. And Oklahoma, not just from firing offensive coordinator Seth Luttrell, but even some of the commentary that we've gotten from Brent Venables since that decision this week. I mean, they are just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. I like this number at 20.5. I'll lay it with Ole Miss, thinking that they just ran out of gas. 7 straight games ending with that overtime loss at LSU. I think they come out of the off week recharged, refreshed, replenished, and ready to lay the wood on the Sooners.
I agree with you, Chris. You said Oklahoma's not a very good football team. I don't think they are either. But you know what else I don't think is a great football team? Kentucky. And Kentucky was able to beat this Ole Miss team. So I think Oklahoma, I don't think they have any chance of winning this game, but I do think their defense is still the strength of this team. Brent Venables, you fire an offensive coordinator in Seth Luttrell. That is a wake-up call to try to jolt everybody alive. The defense doesn't need it. The offense, I think, gets stability going back to Jackson Arnold after those 21 points were surrendered in the first 5 minutes of the game. That's why I'm going to take the under in this one. I think they can slow down Ole Miss's offense enough to kind of keep them in check. I have zero confidence they can put up any points no matter who's calling the plays or who's playing quarterback. That's why I like the under in this game.
Just when you thought you didn't have to pick another Florida State game, they face a ranked team this week. It's Florida State and Miami coming up. And the Hurricanes, they've given up a bunch of points, but Florida State can't score. What's the play for Miami FSU in a 3-touchdown spread? That's next. Continuing our college football picks against the spread, we're wrapping it up with evening games on Saturday. Look at that, BYU unbeaten, only a 1.5 favorite at the Bounce House in Orlando. FSU-Miami. Looking forward to hearing what Danny says about that. Let's start, though, with BYU. What do you think about that spread, Danny? Only laying a 1.5 at UCF, a team that I believe only has 1 win in conference play.
Yes, I think that tells you everything you need to know and why you should be backing the Knights of UCF.
They should have beat Iowa State in Ames last week.
Exactly, and I think the change at quarterback from KJ Jefferson to Ja'Cory Brown has been the difference for this offense. It's really infused some life into this program, and all of a sudden they are that much more competitive. And the Bounce House is one of those places that's really tricky to go into, and I think the fact that BYU comes in with the ranking, they come in with the prolific brand. It's a Big 12 matchup. I think they'll be ready for it. And as good as BYU and the greatest story as they've been, and their resume as good as anybody's in the country, this is where I think the story sadly comes to an end. A couple of them this weekend. I mentioned Boise State earlier, but I also think BYU not only doesn't cover, but I think UCF wins the game outright.
Someone does not like the vibes. Come on. Look, BYU has been exceeding the expectations of the models and the odds makers and the haters every single week. And UCF, as you mentioned, Chris, they poured it out against Iowa State. So while you could argue that there's maybe a little bit of a letdown for BYU after going deep into the night again in Provo against Oklahoma State, maybe getting some advantageous tackling efforts from those Cowboys secondary players, I think that this is just a team that, like maybe TCU from 2 years ago, like a Washington from last year, they start to build confidence in these close games that they have what it takes to win. And so as they're going to play a flawed UCF team that is loaded with dynamic athleticism, I just have more confidence in BYU to come up with the winning plays in a close game than I do with UCF. Because while UCF came so close to winning that game against Iowa State, UCF fans all game are just, I'm done with this team. They're so inconsistent. I mean, it was almost an accident, a happy accident that they were even having a chance to win leading by 5 in the final minutes of the fourth quarter. I'll go with the team that has been more consistent throughout the season, and that would be the Cougars.
Okay, so you have BYU staying perfect, Iowa State perfect, and they'll stay that way into next week because they are idle this week. Danny, your Seminoles are getting 20.5 in a rivalry game against Miami. I read a stat that the Hurricanes are the first FBS team in over 50 years to start conference play 3-0 while allowing 35+ in all those games. But is there any chance that your Noles can reach that number in this game?
You know what this is, right?
What's he writing?
What is that?
This is the records of both these teams, right? 7-0 and 1-6. It's hard to see. Yeah, there's a highlighter on the other side, but it's 7-0 and 1-6. You know what you do with these.
What's that? Oh, you're throwing the records out the window.
You throw out these records right there. You just throw them aside because this is a rivalry game. And I'll tell you why the Seminoles are going to cover. That's why I don't feel it just doesn't feel the same. We're not saying they're going to win, but I'm saying they're going to cover in this game. I don't think it was as bad as we thought it was last week, and it was bad against Duke. Brock Glenn, couple turnovers, he gets benched, and then he comes back in the game. We saw drops all over the field. This is the game where I do think some of it starts to come together, and I am counting on a receiver or two making a play here or there, which is all it's been for Florida State in almost every single game this season. They have had the worst run of luck and bad play, but a lot of bad luck this season, and their defense actually is still making plays for them, and I think this is the opportunity for the defense to potentially start getting some turnovers because Cam Ward, as good as he's been, as high-powered as this offense has been, they have still been susceptible to the turnover bug. We know what Cam Ward likes to do. We know that he likes to take shots down the field. This is Florida State's opportunity to salvage the entire season. So I think you get their best effort on the line. I think you get their best, their maximum effort. I think they're able to establish a little bit of a run game to take some of that load off of Brock Glenn's shoulders. So I think Florida State plays one of their better games of the year in a rivalry game and gets the cover.
And Chip, it feels more like Miami would have to play this thing close as opposed to Florida State playing this game close because it just seems like Miami is that team that it can't pull away from anybody. Why is that?
Well, number one, the turnovers. Number two, the defense gives up explosive plays through the passing attack. Florida State's really going to need to be some real ball hawks out there. They're going to need to force some turnovers, which is a good thing since they're number 133 in turnovers gained so far this season. Yikes. I mean, I guess regression could come, but I think it is more likely that Cam Ward and this offense continue to do what they've done to about every other team that they've played, and that's go and hang a big number on the board. And Florida State's offense cannot catch a big number on the board. If Florida State's offense had simply kneeled almost every play from scrimmage against Duke, they might have found themselves in a better position than they were in the game because the offense is hurting the team so badly. The defense is playing well. The linebackers, coached by Randy Shannon, are even playing well. But Miami is going to be able to score a number that Florida State cannot catch. And the more Florida State becomes more one-dimensional, the way that things are going to pile on. Because while Miami does give up explosive plays, they also still have pass rushers that get sacks, that get tackles for loss. And I think that group against this Florida State offensive line is going to absolutely feast. So at a number that is advantageous towards taking the favorite, with that pushing me over the edge, give me Miami minus 20.5.
You know who scares me more than Cam Ward, more than Xavier Restrepo, or more than Damian Martinez?
Who's that?
It's been the MVP of this team, has been the ACC Command Center. That's what scares me the most about this Miami team. So just hopefully we're able to keep the Command Center in check this game.
Let's move to the Big Ten. This is a sneaky spot for Penn State.
Yeah.
Going to Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin is a different team than they were when they played Alabama earlier this season. And it's going to be a different atmosphere at night at Camp Randall. It always is.
Yes. And Penn State, do you remember who they play next week?
Ohio State.
A little look-ahead game. And I really have been impressed what Luke Fickell's been able to do with this Wisconsin team. After losing Tyler Van Dyke during that Alabama game, they go to Braden Locke. Ches Maluzzi walks away from the team due to injuries, and they've had adversity. They lost back-to-back games, blew the lead against USC, a 21-point lead. But all of a sudden, they've got 3 games in a row that they've won, and their defense has really been impressive. And even though I know the competition hasn't been outstanding, I actually think this is a really good matchup for them because of Penn State's lack of weapons in the pass game. If they can keep Tyler Warren in check, which is not easy, trust me, USC tried and couldn't do it. But now that that's on tape and now there's more film of them being a little bit one-dimensional in the pass game, I think that favors Luke Fickell and that Wisconsin team to be able to hold them in check, which allows them to also keep Nick Singleton and Katron Allen at bay. And I think Wisconsin brings a physical mindset and confidence in this game to keep it inside the number. I don't hate Wisconsin to pull off the upset as the home dog here either. So I'm going to go ahead and back the Badgers here at night.
Super tricky spot. I think that there's something to be said for Luke Fickell. You know, a coach that we've been singing his praises since he had Cincinnati playing, you know, as consistently and at a high enough level that we really hadn't seen, even as, you know, Brian Kelly was there for a hot minute, Butch Jones for a hot minute. You know, Luke Fickell is just simply a great football coach. They're buying into the message. They're playing at a higher level, even against lesser competition. But there is a Penn State side of this that I can't get out of my head because you mentioned the look ahead factor, but James Franklin, as head coach of Penn State, is 94-39. That is a .707 winning percentage. He's won 70% of his games as the Penn State head coach. But James Franklin's record coming off of a bye, 8-13. Wins 70% of his games overall, but coming off of a bye as Penn State's head coach, they win 38% of the time. It's just a trend going into a hostile environment in a look-ahead spot. It's just a few too much candy for me not to grab the points here with the Badgers.
Wisconsin's last 3 games, as Danny was alluding to, they're outscoring opponents 117-16. They've outscored them by 101 over the last 3 games. That'll be a fun one. Let's go to Kansas, where we've got the battle between the Jayhawks and the Wildcats in the Little Apple, Manhattan. Wildcats have won 15 straight in this series.
This is a Brett Yormark play, and what I mean by that is Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, when he promoted the entire conference this offseason at Media Days, he talked about it being the most competitive from top to bottom, and I'm buying into that so that when I see a number this big against 2 conference opponents, even though their records on the totally opposite ends of the spectrum, I say, hold on a second, are we sure that Kansas State can cover that number in a rivalry game as well? Kansas just got a win under their belt, coming in with some more confidence. I'll go ahead and back the Jayhawks here with the big number. I think Kansas State wins. They've been playing really good, but I think the Jayhawks can cover.
I think that we've got a chance to see a high-scoring game because Kansas obviously just put it on Houston, and man, that had to feel good. Jalen Daniels, looking as healthy as he's looked all year. You got Devin Neal running the ball effectively. That Jayhawks offense really struggled out of the gate, and I know that Houston's one of the worst teams in the Big 12, but it made me look under the hood. And if not for the turnovers, it is a Kansas offense that has been able to be productive, getting some yards. They just haven't always been able to cash them in. So I think they're going to be able to take that confidence, take a little bit of that momentum coming out of the win against Houston. If they can limit the turnovers against Kansas State, this is a Kansas State defense that has been had for explosive plays on the back end of that defense. So I'm going to say Kansas is able to go out there and put up a decent number of points. And then Avery Johnson's just going to keep doing what he's done for a long time and being able to rack up the points for Kansas State as well. So instead of playing with that 10.5, I'm going to play with the game where both offenses are successful, and this goes over the total.
Okay, over 55.5. One more game to pick, one more ranked team that we have not picked. That's SMU minus 11.5 at Duke. These are a pair of one-loss teams here. Is SMU that much better?
Do you know that Duke just did something they haven't done in 22 attempts?
They beat your boys.
The mighty Seminoles. I mean, that just doesn't happen every day except for 6 other times this season. I actually think Duke is a really good football team, and I do think Manny Diaz has this defense playing pretty. They had a couple of interceptions last week. Again, that was subpar quarterback play, but I do think this will be a tough environment, which is crazy to think at Wallace Wade Stadium. This would be a challenge for SMU to do it, but I think that's what it is, and I like this SMU team. I do think they win the game. Love what they've done with Kevin Jennings since they've switched to him at quarterback. They haven't lost a game. Remember, Preston Stone was the quarterback that lost to BYU. And, man, this SMU offense looks good, but I think Duke keeps it inside the number, so I'm going to back the Blue Devils here.
Let's start with the news, something that backs up your pick right there. R.J. Maryland, the SMU tight end, who they sometimes flex out to wide receiver, big body, matchup advantage, arguably the one player on this SMU offense that's not a quarterback that defenses have no answer for. We find out this week he's ruled out for the rest of the season. That is big. Now let's get to something else that I just can't get out of my head, which is how familiar these two staffs are. Because Rhett Lashley, the SMU head coach, was Manny Diaz's offensive coordinator. And Manny Diaz's offensive coordinator, Jonathan Brewer, he hired from Rhett Lashley's staff at SMU. So he knows what he knows, and he knows what he knows, and I know your counter and your counter. And this is too many daggone points when everyone knows what the other one is going to do. It's going to be like the scene in Princess Bride where you assume, then I assume, then you assume, and you both end up drinking the poison. So this ends up being a one-score game. This ends up being a game that Duke can cover.
All right, wild one at Wallace Wade. Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell with us, picking every ranked college football game against the spread on HQ. Danny, what did you guys talk about today on the
we had the big game breakdown.
Oh, the big game breakdown.
Specific. Yes. Yeah, it was great stuff.
Good tease. Good tease, Danny. Chip Patterson, Danny Kanell, Tom Fornelli, Bud Elliott. Cover 3 podcast. Scan that QR code. It'll take you right there. It is always one of the most listened to college football podcasts and highest rated college football podcasts in the world.